his abuse he got so confident with the abuse and the level of abuse that he could impose upon me. I would be invited to his house, and so would another boy. Abuse one, turn over and abuse the other. And that's how confident he was in being able to abuse young boys, still knowing that even though somebody was present in the room, that they wouldn't say anything.
What was the reason behind Gary Speed's death? Why did a legend like Gary Speed commit suicide? It's properly gutted us all, hasn't it? He seemed to have everything in order on the outside, a footy star turned boss, the full works. But there's always more to it than meets the eye, innit? It's tough out there in that game, all eyes on you, pressure piled on thick, enough to drive anyone round the bend. Maybe that's what got to Speed. We wish it were the case. Sadly, the reality is far more grave than one can imagine. But there is something else that has been kicking around. There's a darker side to the game, a man named Barry Bennell. He, who was supposed to be coaching kids, turned out to be the right creep. Speed knew him young. Blimey, a proper shocker when you think about it. Maybe that's got something to do with it? Yeah, massive stretch, loads of cobwebs stringing things together, but one thing's for sure, the cracks run deep, mate. At one time, Barry Bennell was seen as something of a wizard where young footballing talent was concerned. He was like a magnet for promising lads. But let's be straight, the glory days were all a front. He was a right dirty player preying on kids at loads of different clubs. He was the big cheese at Crewe Alexandra, calling the shots and all that. The weird thing is, they gave him the boot in 1992 without so much as a whisper about why, like they were covering something up, innit? But things spiralled into chaos at the turn of the millennium. Now, this creep didn't stick to one club, see? This bloke was like some dodgy dealer, going from one place to another, and everywhere he went, he caused all this destruction. Proper shocker how many kids he hurt. Bennell was not just some bad apple at Crewe, he was a right menace. He had also been on the wanted list for Stoke City and Leeds United. Like a virus, he seemed to infect everywhere his poison touched in youth football. There's one dark chapter in this whole sorry tale about a lad called Gary Speed. This lad, a proper talent, full of promise, he crossed paths with Bennell when he was at Leeds United, fresh out of school in 1988, straight from the classroom into the lion's den, so to speak. But before we actually get into this hot potato controversy, smash that like button and do subscribe. Now, let's get back to the video. By that time, Bennell had already carved out a niche for himself in the grimy world of youth football, a true pest. But what is worse is how this creep was able to hop from one club to the next without raising an eyebrow. It is as if the bigwigs of football were wearing blinkers, refusing to see what is in front of them. How on earth did this happen? As plain simple as it sounds, it is a very sad discredit. The whole thing about Bennell is a right sickener, isn't it? Wait till you get a load of his doings. The way people link him with Gary Speed's sad ending is proper gut-wrenching. It's hard to even think about. Loads of poor lads have come forward with stories that'll make your blood run cold. Bennell was a proper bully, creating a toxic atmosphere wherever he went. That term, special child, he used. Yeah, it's turned out to be a nasty little code for his victims. It's a bloody disgrace. These young fellas eyes on playing footy all their lives, and here comes this fella running the show, making all the calls. It's like Big Brother picking on Little Brother, but on a much grander scale, more serious in its consequences. Well, the fear of getting fired, seeing your dreams go up in smoke, and all of that nasty stuff that happened left these kids feeling quite entrapped. They had to keep their mouths shut just to get by. It is heartbreaking, really. Accusations against Barry Bennell are crystal clear, corroborated by a whole load of people coming out with their own horror stories. When it comes to Gary Speed, however, it becomes extremely murky. His sudden death in 2011 was a bolt from the blue, and these new claims have only added to the mystery surrounding his tragic end. Some of the victims have claimed to remember seeing Bennell abusing Speed when they were children. One man is convinced that Speed was another one of his victims. He has described scenes which are truly shocking, ones where this man was sharing a bed with Gary Speed while Bennell carried out his sick attacks. What a tough pill to swallow, and hardly to think about how much pain and confusion Speed must have gone through.
You were absolutely certain that Gary Speed was abused by Bennell?
100%. Well, 99.9%.
Because you were literally both in the bed at the same time?
Yeah. You don't actually witness it sight-wise, but basically the same process is happening to that other person.
So anyone who stayed regularly, what were the chances that they were being abused by Bennell?
I've got pictures of football teams, and you could basically go along the line and say yes, 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 yes.
It's a bit of a pattern, innit? Gary was always hanging around Bennell, like his right-hand man. Fancy cars, presents and holidays. The works. Sounds like Bennell was showering him with stuff to keep him sweet. The way Bennell was treating other lads, you start to wonder if Gary was caught in the same game. One of the lads reckons there has to be some kind of connection between those awful things that happened to Speed as a young lad and why he ended up taking his own life. It is a heavy thing to say, but he believes that abuse was part of it, big time, although problems were going on at the same time as well. One of the men who came forward with his account about Bennell said that Speed was one of 4 lads associated with the creep who ended up taking their own lives. When the police sat down with Gary Speed, he was pretty insistent about denying Bennell's underhand actions, namely that he didn't know anything about them, the coach never did anything improper to him. And to be fair, it is quite a situation. The police thought Speed persisted in trying to clear his name from the allegations, and the police came to the conclusion after investigations that there wasn't enough evidence to link him to the crimes committed by Bennell. In 2011, Gary Speed was in charge of the Welsh national team. You know, the boss, the gaffer. He had been a big deal in football, a proper respected figure, but then out of the blue came the shocking news that he'd been found at his place near Chester. He was only 42. The big moment came in 1998 when Bennell ended up in the dock at Mould Crown Court. He was on a heap of very serious charges, like indecent assault and stuff, all sorts of nasty business. He was pleading innocent, claiming he'd done nothing wrong. We're talking about a period from the 70s, right through to 1992. The victims were kids, some barely out of diapers, others teenagers. In the end, they locked him up for 9 years. 9 years! For all that he'd done, it wasn't enough by any stretch. Bennell wasn't just an England problem, this man was an international menace. It was masquerading as a football coach with the Stone Dominoes, a club in Staffordshire, that his dark side caught up with him on a visit to the United States in 1994. One day, a young lad who was just 13 showed great courage to stand up and say what Bennell had done to him. Massive, a real game changer. That was where Bennell's fall from grace began. The American police in Jacksonville, Florida didn't mess around. They locked him up and threw away the key for 4 years. But let's be honest here, 4 years wasn't anywhere near enough time for the horrors he perpetrated on that young boy, and probably many others. This slimeball got himself into a right pickle over in the States. He got caught red-handed messing about with a young lad. You've got to watch this video that just came up on the ITV news. They just go straight and ask him what he would like to say to the boy he abused. Do you know what he says? Little boy, he wasn't a little boy, he's bigger than me, he's 14.
Anything you'd like to say to the little boy?
Little boy, he wasn't a little boy, he's bigger than me. 14.
Like he's living on another planet or something. No shame, no nothing, just pure arrogance. Makes you sick, doesn't it? To brush it off like it's no big deal? It shows what a twisted mind he's got. The lid was finally blown off the whole sordid affair thanks to a Channel 4 dispatches programme back in 1996. They dug up all this dirt about Bennell and other coaches. It was an eye-opener, really showing just how dark things were in the world of football. A lad called Ian Ackley had the balls to come forward after Bennell got nicked in the US. His story helped put Bennell back in the dock here in the UK, but jail couldn't stop this creep. After serving 9 years here for abusing 6 boys, in 2015 he was behind bars again for another disgusting crime. This time, it was with a lad called David Lean, who was only 12. The poor bloke's life has been since then a nightmare. It's a bloody shame. To top it all off, one of the victims described how Bennell abused him in broad daylight on the pitch at Manchester City. It shows how brazen this guy was, and just how little anyone cared for what was going on in these clubs. The whole Bennell and Gary Speed thing's a right mess, innit? Bennell's always said that he never did anything with Speed, but the damage he did to loads of kids is plain to see. Speed's family have been clear. They don't believe that Gary was abused by Bennell. His dad, Roger, said that it would be easier if they knew why Gary took his own life. It's a heartbreaking situation all around. There's been a load of lads under one wing, so-called Coach Barry Bennell, who sadly kicked the bucket way too soon. Take Mark Owens as a case example. He was brave enough to spill all the beans to the police back in 2016 about the awful things Bennell did to him when he was just a kid. Tragically, however, Mark wrestled with the demon drink for a very long time and he died in his 50s. Then there was Stephen Prince, another poor bloke who got caught up in Bennell's twisted game. He ended up overdosing on drugs at age 20. Some of his old mates from Crewe Alexandra, where Bennell was supposed to be teaching them the ropes, said that Bennell used to accuse Prince of pinching money just to keep a hold on him. Poor old Mark Hazeldine, another one of Bennell's victims, didn't make it either. He sadly took his own life when he was just 36 after fighting a losing battle against drugs and booze. His mum, Margaret, was absolutely gutted and laid the blame right at the door of Bennell and those football clubs who didn't do a thing to keep her lad safe. She was heartbroken, sobbing her guts out, saying, "I can't believe they let it happen." Well, it took a while, but in November 2016, this nasty piece of work finally got his comeuppance. The police turned up at his gaff in Milton Keynes, saying that it was just a routine checkup, even though everyone knew what he was like. A few days later, they found him knocked out cold in a park in Stevenage, probably couldn't handle seeing his dirty laundry all over the news. They nicked him straight away, and that's when the floodgates opened with a load of abuse charges piling up from way back in the early 1980s. Bennell got pinched again. You can guess what for, can't you? This time, he faced even more kiddie abuse charges for stuff done between 1981 and 1985. It was like finding a whole new load of dirt on the bloke. You would think that he would have learned by then, wouldn't you? But nope, he was in even deeper trouble this time. In December 2016, they dragged Bennell back into court at Crewe. They didn't mess about. They locked him up straight away and sent him to Chester Crown Court the next month. The cheeky sod pleaded not guilty to everything, but the law was on his tail. Just a few months later, in March 2017, they slapped him with even more charges. The list of all his nasty deeds just kept rolling out, with more serious things like indecent assault and buggery thrown in. Poor lads must have been terrified. By May 2017, they had chucked another 21 on the pile and, well, your jaw dropped when they chucked another 14 on in June. Bennell must have been sweating bullets by this time, knowing a massive trial was coming up in January 2018. It was a long old slog, but justice was finally on the way. He was Mr. Jones in court. To everyone else, he was something entirely different. The trial began in January 2018, and the cheeky sod actually admitted to some of it, 7 counts to be exact. But he still had a mountain of other accusations against him. The now-aged predator was so unwell that they had to bring him in on video link. Not an easy one for the jury with so much work cut out. What was true, what wasn't. In the end, they convicted him of 36 counts, but even that wasn't the final word. A few days later, they came back with another 7 guilty verdicts. Bennell finally got his just desserts, a whopping 31 years behind bars. That's a very long time, but still not enough for the awful things he did. Having to relive those nightmares in court, it is just a shame. And even then, after that big trial and that big sentence, more poor lads came out saying Bennell had hurt them too. There was talk of another trial, but the judge reckoned it might be too much for the old villain to handle. Bennell didn't give up, though. He tried to wriggle free from that 30-year sentence, but fortunately, the appeal judges told him to do one. It was a massive weight off the shoulders of the victims and their families.
We were little boys with a dream, and our innocence was shattered. Our dream was turned into the most horrendous nightmare. But today, we faced that fear. We broke the silence, and we took back our voice. We looked our abuser in the eye. We are no longer afraid of you, Barry Bennell. Today, justice was done, and you no longer have any power over us. You are nothing to us at all.
In February 2019, Dario Gradi, the old gaffer at Crewe, finally owned up to knowing something was rotten with Bennell. He said they were trying to bring him over from Man City, but they didn't do any proper checks on him. It's like winning matches mattered more than keeping kids safe. The club boss, John Bowler, tried to wriggle out of their responsibilities by saying nobody knew better than. That's a load of old cobblers, isn't it? They should have been looking after those kids no matter what year it was. One of the victims, Steve Walters, was furious. He said that they were trying to say it was all his fault for not coming forward sooner. He had gone through hell, and now the club's trying to wriggle out of paying him what he is owed. It is all about money with them, isn't it? And even while Bennell was already serving a massive sentence, they found him guilty of even more abuse. Well, in May 2020, that sicko Bennell is again in court, charged with another 9 counts. Unbelievable that he pleaded guilty a few months later and got another 4 years chucked on his sentence to make it 34 years inside. That is well proper sickening, innit? The court declared it would be the final prosecution against Bennell, a man who wouldn't see freedom until his 80s. Over 100 lads had come forward, claiming they were abused by the predator. He'd been convicted of abusing 22 boys. It was a damning indictment of the justice system. How had this monster been allowed to roam free for so long, preying on innocent kids? It was a scandal that rocked the nation. The question on everyone's lips was, how could this have happened? Where had the system gone wrong? And the moment everyone had been waiting for Barry Bennell, the man who destroyed so many young lives, finally died. He was 69 years old and was rotting in prison, serving a sentence that wasn't even half as long as he deserved for the atrocities he committed. They found him dead in his cell in September 2023. That is the squalid end of a grotesque life, but it does nothing to alter what he did to those lads. They've had to put up with that nightmare for years, and we reckon some will never be the same again. It's just plain tragic if you ask us. Loads of blokes who have had a tough time just keep it all bottled up. We mean someone like Speed, a proper football legend, you wouldn't think he would be hiding anything. He may have been ashamed or guilty about it, or felt he had to be strong for others. You know how these lads are, always having to be in control and tough. It's as if we all have to put on a face and hide the way we really feel. So maybe Gary Speed thought he had to keep it all locked away to protect his reputation. That really is a shame. This has made us realise we need to change how we look at blokes and mental health.
How difficult was that? Was it easier to keep it a secret, or did you struggle to keep it inside?
I didn't struggle. At times when we talked about football and certain things would crop up, but I sort of locked it away.
Yes.
Started off at 8 and obviously you have your dreams. I walked away from football at 14, 15. Luckily I was quite good at golf and that was my get out clause.
Did you walk away because of him?
Yeah.
We need to make it all right for lads to talk about their feelings and ask for help if they need it. The shadow of Barry Bennell and how Gary Speed ended up. It's a proper kick in the teeth for football if you ask me. Yeah, it's a game we love, but all this just goes to show the dark side. All those kids who got hurt, it's just a stain on the sport that'll take ages to clean up. Football's got to be honest about what's gone on and stop covering things up. We've got to look after the lads who've been hurt and make sure this never happens again. The story of Speed should be a rude awakening. He was a legend, and just the way he turned out in the end, well, it's just a tragedy. We need to create a game where everyone feels safe and supported. It will take everyone working together to fix this mess. We've got to start caring about each other and to make sure that justice is channeled out. Then we shall build something better for the future of football. That's it for this one. If Barry Bennell's case piqued your interest, make sure to check out our other videos on sports icons.